Hello, everybody out there in radio land. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. This is a weekly program where we come onto your radio dial and we talk to y'all about what is going on here in the city of Kalamazoo, the state of Michigan, the so-called United States, and the rest of the world from a working class perspective, calling out the BS. And again, as the name implies, really kind of digging under some of the media narratives about what is going on. As always, the following thoughts, views, and opinions are not necessarily those of 89.1 WIDR or Western Michigan University, no matter how dope or insightful they may turn out to be. So, this little news program, we've been kind of on hiatus for the last month or so. If you've been tuning in, we've been doing just kind of some our best of material. And a lot of it, again, I try to pick some things that were very relevant to the political situation currently going on. So we'll link back to these in the show notes, but we had a great interview with Catherine Joyce from salon.com talking about Hillsdale College as a right-wing think tank. I think that directly leads into what people have been talking about this election season with Project 2025. And, it's kind of important context, talking about, one of those think tanks that are right here in our backyard. And again, a lot of what is in Project 2025, in particular in regards to education, was directly developed down at Hillsdale College. Also, we started off this month my interview on the many worlds of American communism with Dr. Joshua Morris. And I think that's a good primer on the capacity of working people and the working class to exert its power and get concessions from the ruling class, which I think, regardless of who wins this election coming up, is going to be there. Those are going to be some very critical and important lessons. And around the week that Netanyahu came and visited, we played back a lecture from our friends at Kalamazoo Nonviolent Opponents of War, talking about the conflict in Gaza and the history around it. So we're back. We're back live, and honestly, I don't know. This is a pretty slow news month. There's not really going to be much to talk about. Of course, you can probably detect the sarcasm in my voice. This was a heck of a month for us to pick to go on hiatus. We did need it. I needed to recharge my batteries, and I also had some family issues to attend to. But there's that classic quote from Vladimir Lenin. There are decades where nothing happens, and weeks where decades happen, and we had a couple of decades happen last month. This last month. So Lawrence will be joining me in about half an hour, and we're going to dig into all of those. We'll probably start off talking about something a little bit more local and important. The Michigan primary is coming up next week. We're going to spend some time talking about that, and then we will be diving into all the news that was in this crazy month of July 2024. Before we do that, though, let's again, as we say, we start at the local level, and there's a very important local story I want to start with, and I'm basically going to be just reading right from the source here, but the Western Michigan University chapter of the American Association of University Professors, which is the union that represents them, they put out a message on their website just a couple days ago on July 25th, and it's really important talking about their current negotiations with the university. So I'm going to be reading directly from Dr. Catherine Bailey's statement, who is the current president of the AAUP chapter here at the school. And here is what they have to say about the current state of their negotiations with the university and what they are calling questionable tactics. Western's management, a handful of university administrators, led once again by an exorbitantly paid attorney from a union-busting Detroit firm, is refusing to provide data necessary for us to advocate effectively for our members. Indeed, week after week, the WMU AAUP team, guided for the first time ever by a labor-centered external healthcare consultant, has faced stonewalling as the WMU administration throws up its hands, claiming that it is unable to provide information about how much it spends on healthcare each year. In addition, WMU AAUP members and allies are reporting that union pride and other negotiation related posters are being torn down by the university almost as quickly as they are posted. In general, the message that our employer is sending to campus employees, and keep in mind that the salary portion of negotiations has yet to begin, is one of obstruction and obfuscation. More specifically, with respect to healthcare, the WMU AAUP negotiation team has repeatedly requested data regarding rate developments and the reconciliation reports of employee healthcare costs. This is critical to achieve even a modicum of transparency about how the annual rates for healthcare are being projected, and also to assess the balance between employee insurance claims and contributions made by the university. As our team has pressed for data week after week, the administration has resisted. Shockingly, the administration is now claiming that they themselves do not assess such reports from external consultants and vendors, data that we are confident is available to them. Whether the administration's response here is straightforward stonewalling or based on a stunningly irresponsible lack of curiosity on their part, it obviously puts WMU employees at a huge disadvantage. Without such data on the table for all to see, WMU can, as it has apparently done at least some past negotiations, make assertions about its healthcare costs that are wildly exaggerated. And the fact that these administrators are not embarrassed to openly assert to us that they do not themselves even bother to request such basic, vital information is noteworthy given the constant administrative rhetoric about scarce resources and fiduciary responsibility. To provide a bit more context for all of this, please note again that as I write this, negotiations regarding salary increases, usually the most contentious part of labor negotiations, have not even begun. But please keep in mind that the WMU administration has historically insisted on tying compensation to healthcare benefits during negotiations, effectively claiming that any salary raises will have to be balanced by employee concessions on healthcare. It's similar to a common tactic used at car dealerships when the trade in value, new car cost, and financing charges get rolled together in a way meant to confuse the buyer and grossly advantage the dealership. You can be sure then that the WMU administration has gotten in the habit of mashing together these two distinct matters, compensation and healthcare, precisely because it has been beneficial for them to do so. This also helps shed light on why the administration has been so adamant that employees be kept in the dark about the actual costs of healthcare. What would employees accept as fair compensation and healthcare if we knew how much our benefits are actually costing the university? Given how reluctant the administration is to provide this information, one is left to imagine they must be raking in huge profits in this area and perhaps have been for decades. In closing, I'll return to the concern about negotiation related union pride posters being torn down by the administration, an act that I construe as part of the administration's overall campaign to demoralize and intimidate employees. This administration, while claiming to be employee centered and union friendly, evidently does not welcome the visible signs of employee solidarity or robust critique that are a normal part of nearly all negotiation cycles. Although it is disappointing that Western Michigan University has become increasingly inured to and intolerant of employee input and dissent, and increasingly dismissive of its negotiated labor contracts, the good news for employees is that this administration is nervous about the power of worker solidarity. Just as a quick aside, folks out there who are listening, especially, students and staff who are at the university on a daily basis, please hit us up. If you see union posters being torn down or see, where a union friendly poster was and is no longer there, please let us know. I would like to do our part to kind of keep the university in check to make sure that union-friendly signage gets to stay up in our university commons. Going on, To be sure, employers who are genuinely committed to treating employees fairly and respectfully do not rely on intimidation tactics, gaslighting, or stonewalling. Indeed, one reason some universities become known as a great place to work is precisely by how their management handles negotiations and other dealings with their labor unions. What can the general public here in Kalamazoo do in addition to all the instructions you may receive? Again, this is more if you subscribe to the AAUP's newsletter here, but they are asking folks if they could share the message widely. Uh, Contact the union to arrange and pick up posters, other materials they may have. And whatever degree you feel able, connect with union-friendly WMU colleagues, including administrators. Make sure they understand how the negotiation team is treating them. And again, that was a message from WMU, the American Association of University Professors, labor union president, Dr. Catherine Bailey, on the current state of negotiations with the university. And we will link to their website in the show notes so you can read that for yourself. And also, again, share that out if you think that would be helpful. So going on, we're going to go up to statewide stories. And this next one is more of a quick hit here. And this comes to us from the Detroit Free Press. And I'm going to have a little bit of commentary on this one, but it's mostly just going to be this is a bit of good news, but pointedly, it's kind of some good news that is well, it's been far too delayed. It's been far too long before this good news happened, and you might understand what I mean by this after I talk about the story. This comes from the Detroit Free Press. This article was written by Arpin Lobo, published on July 26th and updated on the 29th. Michigan bans gay and trans panic defense in criminal cases. Michigan began the 20th state to ban gay and trans panic defense in criminal cases after Governor Gretchen Whitmer signed legislation this week to specify that an individual's sexual orientation or gender identity cannot be used as evidence in a defense for a crime committed against them. The National LGBTQ plus Bar Association indicates panic defense involves an individual charged with a crime invoking the sexual orientation or gender identity of a victim to reduce or avoid criminal liability. So just for some of my younger listeners, let me explain a little bit about the panic defense. So the idea is you might be on a date with somebody and it gets time to get intimate. And the idea is maybe you didn't know they were trans and you find out in that intimate space and then you kill them. In many states, it is legal to say because they did not disclose that until that moment, it is legally all right for you to assault or murder them. Yeah, so yeah, that's still on the books in a lot of states, including apparently until very recently, Michigan. So going on, uh, House Bill 4718, signed by Whitmer on Tuesday, prohibits using sexual orientation or gender identity as evidence to demonstrate reasonable provocation to show that an act was committed in the heat of passion or to support a defense of reduced mental capacity. Notwithstanding the provisions of any other law in the state, an individual is not justified in using force against another individual based on the discovery of, knowledge about, or potential disclosure of the victim's actual or perceived sex, gender identity, gender expression, or sexual orientation, the bill states. And just as an aside, like the fact that this was ever on the books is really just absolutely shameful. And the obvious thing should be pointed out. If if you're not into that, you can always walk away. But going on. Bill sponsor state representative Laura Pahutsky from Livonia said the ban of gay and trans panic defense in Michigan is another step taken by lawmakers to make Michigan a more welcoming state for LGBTQ plus people. In an email statement, she also pointed to Michigan's expansion of its civil rights law to bar discrimination based on sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression. as well as a ban on conversion therapy for LGBTQ minors signed into law last year. Now that the legislation is law, members of our queer communities are even safer and the freedoms are even more secure, Pohutsky said. Advocates for the LGBTQ community in Michigan had sought a ban on gay and trans panic defense, the Free Press reported last year. A 22-page resolution adopted in 2013 by the American Bar Association urged local, state, and federal government officials to ban gay and trans panic defense, stating laws allowing the defense enshrine in the law the notion that LGBT lives are worth less than others. Including Michigan, 20 states and Washington, D.C. currently ban gay and trans panic defense, according to the Movement Advance Project, a think tank that researches LGBTQ plus issues. So that's good-ish news, but if you're doing the math, that means most of America still allows for the gay gay/trans panic defense. And as my colleague Nora pointed out, who is a regular commentator on our show, I think they summed it up quite succinctly in their response to the story when they said, took long enough. And for anybody who is skeptical about the degree to which your queer and trans friends are panicking about the upcoming election or Project 2025, or the way the Democratic Party has just kind of ignored the assault on their rights, not necessarily here in Michigan, but in many places, please point out that in 30 states it is legal for people to use this defense that basically says that in the heat of the moment, I didn't know that they were gay or trans, so I could shoot them. So at least there is that good news that is no longer permissible in the state of Michigan. But yeah, as my co-host said, took long enough. I'm going to take just a quick little break. Just gonna take a sip of water, come back. We've got a story about working conditions here in the state of Michigan. Keep your dial locked. This is Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org, your source for political revolution. Hello again, everybody out there in Radio Land. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR, your source for political revolution. In any case, let's go ahead and get back into some stories we got here. I wanted to talk about this next one. This is another Michigan-based story. It comes to us from the World Socialist website. I'm talking about a workplace accident over on the east side of the state. This was published on July 25th. Worker killed by falling equipment at Michigan stamping plant slated for closure. It's written by J.M. Palmer, and I'm going to be reading just a little bit from the article. A worker was killed while on the job at Dexter Stamping, a metal stamping company just to the west of Jackson, Michigan, on July 15th. The 36-year-old worker, a die setter, was killed by a large and heavy die that fell while being transported by an overhead crane. A report by the Michigan Occupational Safety and Health Administration 2024 fatality information, which is derived from the employer's incident report, read, on July 15th, a 36-year-old die setter was transporting/lifting a die with a crane when the swivel bolt broke loose. As a result, one corner of the die hit the ground, causing the top half of the die to separate and crush the victim. According to the employer's incident report, the swivel bolt was not fully threaded into the die and came out of the hole. The statement from the company seems to imply that there was some carelessness and negligence on the part of the worker himself, or perhaps another worker. Significantly, the report does not mention Dexter Stamping in its database. The death occurred only days before the plant is due to close. Dexter Stamping Company announced on April 15th that it will cease operations and lay off all of their workers at the facility by July 31st. In all, 66 employees will be laid off. Dexter Stamping, which has been in business since 1955, provides stamping and sub-assemblies for the automotive industry. It is part of a larger corporate entity, Dynamic Industrial Group, LLC, based in Elkhart, Indiana. The company has a facility in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, which is not being shuttered. The owners claim that they are quote unquote world class, go to, excellent, and other such superlatives. They boast that they have continued to grow while other suppliers have closed their doors, except they're literally closing their doors tomorrow anyway. According to state data, the death at Dexter Stamping was the 14th workplace fatality in Michigan so far this year. There were 36 workplace deaths in 2023, 45 deaths in 2022, and 54 deaths in 2021. According to a study by American Public Media Research Lab, fatal occupational injuries have surged since the economic downturn associated with the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. Traffic accidents cause most work-related deaths, but falls at the work site and workers' exposure to toxic substances, heavy machinery, and physical violence are also major causes of what the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics refers to as fatal occupational injuries, reported the American Public Media Study. The imminent shutdown of Dexter Stamping is part of the jobs massacre that has hit the automotive manufacturing sector associated with the transition from internal combustion engine cars to electric vehicles. In the US, there have been 21,328 job cuts announced in the auto industry since the beginning of 2024, up 18% from the 18,017 cuts announced through May 2023, according to a job placement firm, Challenger, Gray, and Christmas. Stellantis, formerly Fiat Chrysler, announced 4,000 temporary layoffs at assembly facilities earlier this month, and the company fired at least 2,300 temporary part-time workers or supplemental employees earlier in this year. Stellantis also cut 2,453 full-time and SEs at the Detroit Assembly Complex, MAC, and laid off hundreds of parts sequencing workers at the Transmission Complex in Kokomo, Indiana. In March, Stellantis eliminated the jobs of 400 engineering and technology workers. These layoffs and plant closures are part of a global assault on auto worker jobs, with Ford Europe announcing 3,800 layoffs in June, along with a new round of job cuts in Germany, Spain, and the United Kingdom. A discussion on Facebook about the death of the Dexter Stamping worker elicited comments from people who said they were either current or former employees of Dexter Stamping. One commentator posted a photo from inside the plant and said, "Place is a mess in there." Another worker said, "That's why I left that filthy, nasty place a while ago. Damn shame." Another thread about the death, a worker wrote, "When I worked there, I had an accident due to my supervisor's fault, and I now have permanent damage to my right hand. Supervisor even admitted fault, and yet Dexter fired me while on workman's comp, claiming they didn't need as many temps anymore. I was the only one let go." And if you want to read that article for yourself, that's on the World Socialist website. Worker killed by falling equipment at Michigan stamping plant slated for closure. All right. Well, with that, I'm going to dig into another article here from our friends at the World Socialist website. Give me just a second to cue it up here. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online widerfm.org. Quick reminder, you can also find us online. We've got a page on Facebook where you can find a lot of our content. Also, you can find us on YouTube. We usually upload all of our episodes after that, and we also have the Media Cyphers podcast, which you can find on most podcasting apps. And just a quick reminder, we are the number 4 podcast in Kalamazoo, according to Podfeed. So, yeah, again, tooting my own horn, but it's a horn worth tooting. Anyway, while we're waiting to kind of get on to the next subject, I wanted to bring up, this is another article from a World Socialist website about the poverty here in the state of Michigan. I thought this was a really fascinating article. This was written by Nancy Hanover, published on July 22nd. Michigan mired in poverty with 41% living paycheck to paycheck. An estimated 41% of Michigan households, 1.7 million, are living paycheck to paycheck and lack enough income to cover basic household expenses, according to a 2024 report issued by the Michigan Association of United Ways and United for Alice. These statistics are even worse in 11 Michigan counties, including Detroit's Wayne County, in which more than half of households are struggling to maintain a survival budget. In Detroit, 69% of households live paycheck to paycheck. In River Rouge, 79%. Benton Harbor, 78%. Highland Park, 76%. And Pontiac, 66%. The updated report is based on data surveys from 2022 and 2023. The study focused on a broader definition of poverty than the notoriously inaccurate federal poverty level by including those who are ALICE, that is, asset limited, income constrained, and employed. It sheds light on the vast numbers of working poor who do not qualify for federal assistance, but nevertheless must choose between quality childcare or paying the rent, taking their medications or buying nutritious food, or some other impossible trade off. The plight of these millions of low paid workers is routinely concealed in the official claims of low unemployment. Michigan's poverty rate remained at 13% between 2021 and 2022. This is defined as less than an annual income of $13,590 for an individual or $27,750 for a family of four. Such obviously unsustainably low incomes mean living with insecure housing or doubling up with others, relying on food pantries or on family members for assistance, and, of course, constant anxiety. With official poverty numbers showed little change, 41% of all households in the state, that's about 1.6 or 1.7 million, fell below the Alice threshold in 2022. As shocking as these enormous numbers are, they are mirrored across the US, where 42% of all households qualify as Alice. The recent dramatic rise in the percentage of working poor has resulted from double digit rises in the cost of many staple foods, higher rents, and stagnating poverty level wages. This terrible squeeze on budgets has been coupled with the Biden administration's decision to end minimal pandemic aid programs. These include the expanded child tax credit, the child independent care tax credit, extended unemployment benefits, waivers for food stamps, pause in student loan repayments, and Medicaid expansion. The latest Alice report cites the enormous economic hit created by the termination of these programs for impoverished families with young children. In 2022, a family of four with an infant and a preschooler in Michigan were eligible for approximately $15,000 less in maximal federal tax credits and stimulus payments than in 2021. I just want to take a quick aside and talk about this a little bit. I think this is a less discussed aspect of some of Biden and, well, I guess now Harris's crashing poll numbers, and why a lot of the quote unquote progressive policy that they were able to actually get accomplished isn't really remembered or focused on by the general electorate. And it is that for this period after Biden was elected during the pandemic, Americans got a little bit of a taste of what an actual social safety net could look like. And Americans across the board found it very popular. They liked it, regardless of political affiliation. That is the working class. That is, rich people didn't really like it that much. And to have that all taken away, that was a very bitter pill for the American electorate to have to swallow, and something that I think a lot of us are going to remember in the elections in the years to come. That our government is capable of taking care of the working class a little bit. It's just that they don't want to, and that was a very bitter lesson to get here in these last 4 years. Rochelle, a member of the Michigan Educators Rank and File Committee, emphasized this reality in an interview with the World Socialist website. Families have no vehicles and no reliable transportation. Any assistance for daycare is hard to get and not very much help with the cost going so high. Many parents are working and unable to get their kids off to school. They're relying on others to do that for them. In many low income families, the other children end up staying home to look after kids who are too young to go to school. Daycare itself is just too expensive. When I was young, I was basically working for nothing but my pension. Most of my check went to pay for daycare. Now, there are people who are working all these weird shifts, and there's an extra burden with that. They have to rest, but it may not be when their children are sleeping. What can they do? According to Alice's report, the cost of essentials, including daycare in the U.S. Midwest, rose 10.3% between 2021 and 2022, with another 5.8% rise in 2023, substantially faster than the official rise in the cost of living, used as a benchmark for federal assistance. Median rent in Michigan also rose nearly 9% in 2022, the ninth highest increase among all states. I should mention, too, the rise in Kalamazoo was particularly high. MLive reports that median rent for a one-bedroom apartment in Michigan jumped by $251 from $1,116 in May 2020 to $1,367 in May 2023. Protesters at the state capitol in Lansing last September held a rent is too darn high rally with signs that included, I pay $1,314 a month for cockroaches and black mold. We covered that on our show back when that happened. I will link to that in the show notes if you're interested. Another measure of the destitution of large swaths of Michigan, the Detroit News recently reported on the skyrocketing of pregnancy-related deaths in the state. From 2019 to 2020, maternal deaths rose 33.6%, while a separate study showed that these were overwhelmingly preventable, i.e., the rise of poverty. Poverty rates increased in 49 of 83 Michigan counties in 2022, and the state is among 16 that experienced 2 years of increases. The overall rate is now 13th among states, up from 18th in 2021. It's not surprising, Lisa Chapman, Director of Public Policy for the Michigan Coalition Against Homelessness, told Bridge, Michigan. In 2022, homelessness rose by 8% to over 32,400, she explained. People don't have a lot of cushion, Chapman said, adding that families have to choose what bill to pay. It's tragic. While tragic, the escalation of poverty in Michigan has been the result of bipartisan political decision-making. While terminating relief for workers, the Democratic Biden administration allocated a record military budget of $1 trillion, while repeated additional packages of tens of billions for Israel's genocide and the NATO war against Russia. Workers are suffering not because there is no money, but because U.S. imperialism prioritizes war and profit-taking. As for Michigan politics, the state has been controlled by a Democratic Party trifecta. The governorship under Gretchen Whitmer and a Democratic majority in both houses of the state legislature. Whitmer, now being considered as a possible vice presidential candidate, has handed billions to the automakers in the form of tax cuts and grants while terminating assistance programs. A significant turning point in the well-being of the state's population, however, occurred in 2009 when the Obama administration carried out a government restructuring of the auto industry to bail out investors. They imposed a 50% cut in the wages of about 90,000 newly hired auto workers and plunged workers in the crisis almost overnight. As a quick aside, the recent UAW strikes and all that stuff that happened last year was largely about taking those cuts away and restoring the previous standard of living before those cuts back in 2009. Going on, Michigan residents' personal incomes reached their peak in 1953 when American cars dominated the world market, and auto workers mounted powerful strikes to secure a decent living standard. The gains of U.S. auto workers were the envy of the world. These achievements have been reversed. By 2022, however, personal incomes in the state hit their lowest level in history compared to the national average. So again, if you want to read that article for yourself, you can find that on the World Socialist website. Michigan mired in poverty with 41% living paycheck to paycheck. That was written by Nancy Hanover, published on July 22nd. Well, we're going to take a quick little break. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. A quick reminder, you can also find us online at our Facebook page. Also, you can find us on YouTube, Media Cyphers, and our podcast, Media Cyphers Kalamazoo, which is streaming on most podcasting apps. easily accessible from your phone. You can listen to our local and national, statewide, and international commentary at your leisure. Keep your dial locked. We will be right back, and we'll be talking a little bit about the primary for U.S. Senate here in the state of Michigan. Keep your dial locked. This is Media Cyphers, your source for political revolution. Only on 89.1 WIDR, joined by my co-host Lawrence. Lawrence, how you doing?
I'm doing good, man. How are you?
Oh, things are good actually. Things are getting better.
Man,
I mentioned at the top,
man.
stuff going on in my personal life that's taken a turn for the better, which is good.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
I think the last time I talked to you was before the debate
that's
in
like, yeah,
a lifetime of news has passed in the
yeah,
last month.
yeah. As I mentioned at the top, we picked a hell of a month to go on hiatus. So.
Yeah.
And so we'll
Right.
be we'll be getting into all of that stuff, playing catch up. I did want to talk a little bit about so the primary is next week, next Tuesday.
Right.
Um, and first of all, there's not much going on here locally, which is to say, it's a mulligan for Jessica Schwartz. Joseph Alfonso was running for this congressional seat, that CD4, trying to unseat Bill Huizenga in November. They ended up dropping out towards the end of the last spring. Said some want to spend more time with their family, etc. We did invite Jessica Schwartz on the show. She never got back to us. We did interview Joseph Alfonso, but I mean, they dropped out, so not really. I got to play that back, but so that's basically that. But probably the biggest race going on Tuesday, and reason you should spend some time going to polls is that the primary for the U.S. Senate is that day, and right now it is a race between Elissa Slotkin and Hill Harper, and just from some of the polling I've seen, it does sound like it might be a little bit more likely that Slotkin is going to get in, which would be honestly a kind of unfortunate. And it is unfortunate for some of the reasons we are about to get into. Um, so Hill Harper, he's definitely the more left of center progressive candidate. He's gotten endorsements from the Progressive Caucus, also the Black Caucus. Kind of based out of Detroit, running a small coffee shop, small business owner. Um,
Former TV actor. He was on uh what was it in New York CIS, the CIS New York
oh,
show.
yeah, that's funny because
Like, yeah.
I was like, I saw this picture. It's like he looks kind of familiar, but I don't know where. It's like,
Yeah,
oh, okay,
he
all
he
right.
was he was the lab tech. He was the one that would always analyze clues and stuff. Like he wasn't one of the cops. He was one of the lab people.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So yeah.
And you can go to his website, and the four things that he lists, he doesn't go into every single issue, but the four that he lists is climate justice in the filibuster, jobs and economic dignity, and universal health care. To his credit, he does specifically refer to a single payer healthcare system when he's talking about universal healthcare. Some politicians get a little tricky with that. It's like, oh, everybody should have healthcare, like asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. So he does specifically cite lowering prescription drugs also, and a single payer healthcare system. Um, and then also I do like that he makes climate change like really front and center. Um, Talking about how that affects Michigan, heavy rainstorms, ice coverage of the Great Lakes. Talks about how we can kind of use these sort of like Green New Deal ideas and implement them in Michigan, and particularly prioritize low income communities, communities of color. and trying to protect our drinking water, from PFAS and pollution and stuff, which is, especially thinking about Line 5 up in the north is pretty important. Just to contrast, so
should we
with
should we contrast her? Should
yeah,
we contrast Hill
yeah,
with uh with the with Stockings, Miss
Slotkin,
Stockings,
Slotkin,
Slockins.
Elissa
Yeah,
Slotkin, who she's been
born in New York, New York.
New
Got her
York.
bachelor's in rural sociology from Cornell University. Got her master's at Columbus University. Um, uh, in the early aughts, and then spent a large portion of her career in the Middle East. In the Middle East, analyst with the CIA,
Yeah.
with the with the
eh,
director, and the director of Iraq with the National Security Council. Yeah, she's she's an op.
yes, exactly. And like we actually did interviewed a journalist from the World Socialist website a couple years ago on their piece, the CIA Democrats, and we actually spent, this is before Slotkin actually got elected, but yeah, we spent a good chunk of time talking about her record. And yeah, as you said, she is an op running to replace Debbie Stabenow, which is pretty distressing because, like, I guess, one make arguments like, oh, I wish Hill Harper was a little bit more left on this, that, or what have you, but like, they are, again, they're a union organizer, as Lawrence mentioned, an actor. They've also graduated, or sorry, they also have a background in law, so Hill Harper is closer to a regular person than basically what would amount to installing somebody. Again, Republicans have disparaged the term deep state, to almost the point of disuse. But if there's somebody you could associate with the deep state, that is like Elissa Slotkin. Um, so that's basically, just from a personal perspective. Also, Hill, to his progressive pedigree, has mostly relied on small donor donations. If you go to Slotkin's page on Open Secrets, it's a great website for kind of figuring out who is giving what money to what politicians and stuff. Some of the top donors include University of Michigan, Michigan State University, the Henry Ford Health System. Probably most eye-opening to me, at number 6 is Google, which, as you know, if you've listened to our show a while, they have many, many, many contracts with the Defense Department, as well as Wilmer Hale LLP, which most of y'all may not know that off the top of the head, but they're according to their website, they are a law firm working at the intersection of government and business, which is basically, in plain terms, groups like WilmerHale are usually kind of the tip of the spear when it comes to international finance and the intersection of the military-industrial complex and big business. So it's very
Yeah,
telling that.
that's corporate. That's corporate speak for we want tax cuts for our corporations, and we will give whoever gives us those tax cuts kickbacks. That's
Yep, absolutely. And I would also say that um, other things to really report on, and I think this is a big contrast because, of course, and we're going to be talking a little bit about this later on in the show as well. The current genocide in Gaza. It's been, what do people think about it? And Hill Harper, very plain, very clear, he is calling for a ceasefire. He's continued calling for a ceasefire. Fire. According to his statement, Gaza and my hometown of Detroit share a similarity in size, each spanning about 140 square miles. It's heart-wrenching to even begin to imagine what it'd be like if one out of every 100 people in Detroit were lost to a relentless shadow war. The agonizing tragedy is the reality in Gaza. So again, very, very powerful statement from Hill Harper. The full statement's on his website, but He is unequivocally
Can I
calling for a permanent ceasefire.
let me contrast that because I'm biased. Like I'm not gonna lie to y'all, I'm biased. I believe I always vote for candidates that fight for and speak about universal healthcare, single payer healthcare. I'm biased because I have asthma and because of the amount of families and family members and friends that I've seen go into bankruptcy because of medical debt. The number one reason why most Americans go into debt in this country is because of medical debt. So I'm biased. I'm letting y'all know that now. So when I read statements that's on Miss Slotkin's website, because I'm on her website right now, and she says things like, Elissa believes all Americans should have access to healthcare that can afford that can afford regardless of pre-existing conditions. Period. Stop right there before I even go on. When you hear a politician say that you should have access to something, and they're not saying in other clarifying terms that therefore a single payer or even a public option type of system, which she doesn't in this statement. I'm gonna finish reading it. That means she's not fighting for it. That means that she is willing to get paid off by those industries while giving lip service to those who read this. These are the weasel words that you hear from politicians when they don't support something. Because you can have access to a car that may be affordable, but can you afford it? You may have access to food that could be healthy, but do you have money to afford it? And if you're saying that you don't even, and it goes further, uh, again, more real words. No one should ever go broke because they happen to get sick, and no family should have to decide whether they can afford to save the life of a loved one. In Congress, Elissa has taken the fight to big pharma and has helped pass legislation to make prescription drugs prices more transparent. That is incoming. That is coming into force in the early 2023. Wait, so you want prices to be more transparent, and she says in her thing that she wants to let Medicaid negotiate lower drug prices. That is the bare minimum of the barest minimum, and that's literally to the right of what Joe Biden did, because Biden lowered prescription drug prices, but it was only for 10 drugs. It was only for 10 drugs. The legislation that she's talking about uh doesn't went into effect earlier in 2023, but most Americans still have to pay 50, 100, $200 for most of their prescription drugs. Instead of saying, "Hey yo, we just need a public option. Hey yo, we need single payer healthcare." I'm for these programs that would lower it without us needing to talk about it, without us needing to go through the rigmarole or me give you these weasel words. She's not for a system that would help the average American, and that's the problem for me. And I'm if it's her versus the Republican, I would vote for her. But if it's her versus Hill, I'm voting for Hill.
Yeah, no, and thanks again for I wasn't gonna focus on the healthcare piece, so thanks for getting that all out to our listeners. And I guess I did. So the thing I would mention. So uh, I did want to contrast her stance on the genocide in Gaza versus Hill's. And conveniently, she's got on her website a whole page about statements on the ongoing conflict in the Middle East. And so it's this is pretty embarrassing. So most of it is just tone policing, uh, how uh, how U.S. Based protesters are protesting. And I mean, I will say she does call out, she called out some stochastic terrorism that has happened against Palestinian Americans. But she's also just been following she's been following the administration's line of conflating protest, protest against the state of Israel with anti-Semitism. And if you read up on these statements, that it's like time and time again, that's precisely what she's doing. Um, and even going back to so she referenced the rescue of hostages on June 8th, which, if you remember our story about that, they killed about 200 Palestinians in order to get those hostages. And again, just talking about anti-Semitism being on the rise, focusing on that, which again, these protests have been anti-Zionist, not anti-Semitic. We'll say this on a show again and again, and also adhering to some of the Biden administration's false talking points about how, oh, Hamas is the main problem in these negotiations. That's why we don't have a ceasefire deal. Right? Every credible international journalist on planet Earth could basically tell you, whatever else you think about Hamas, they've been pretty consistent. They want a permanent ceasefire. They do not want a temporary one. They want to ensure that Israel isn't just going to start bombing the Gaza Strip again inside of a month. Um, Israel have been the ones who have been tiptoeing around and refusing to sign off on the deal. Even people in Israel recognize this. Many protesters from when Netanyahu came to visit pointed out that it's Netanyahu's fault that the ceasefire has not been signed yet. So what you get from Slotkin is what we should expect from somebody who is done the tango with AIPAC in the past. It's a lot of, again, focusing on this false specter of anti-Semitism, which, again, there's a lot of legitimate anti-Semitism in this country, mostly coming from the right, um, and tiptoeing around calling for a ceasefire. And when you do have to mention ceasefire, um, basically getting this false narrative that it is the opposing side that is preventing the ceasefire rather than the state of Israel itself. Honestly, I don't know if we talked how much we talked about the debate last month, but one of Trump's only honest moments up on the stage, he recognized that, oh no, it's Israel are the ones that are preventing the ceasefire, but I support that 100%. So yeah, just to compare and contrast, if Slotkin ends up winning this primary next week, we are going to be getting one of those very staunchly pro-Zionist Democrats who have basically spent the season slandering student protesters and basically absolving the state of Israel of any responsibility from this giant genocidal mess they've made in the Gaza Strip.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. She one of her biggest accomplishments is let me go back to when you go back to her biography, she was on the director of the Iraq with the National Security Council, the Middle East transition with the office of with the Undersecretary of Defense for policy. Like she spent a lot of time um working with international security affairs with the office of the Secretary of Defense. Like I'm not surprised that her stance in especially when it comes to Gaza is we should believe what Israel's telling us. Like I'm not surprised that she's like, yeah, I stand with the people who we are giving billions of dollars to, because let's also be clear, she's a politician. APAC has literally spent millions of dollars affecting our politics this year alone. I I'm not surprised that she wouldn't be getting kickbacks from that organization either, especially with the stances that she's been saying. Like I'm I'm not surprised, and We deserve better. Michigan, we had Debbie Stabenow. Debbie Stabenow wasn't a great progressive. She wasn't a progressive at all. Okay. Gary Peters, who's also one of our senators, is not a great progressive. We deserve better. We deserve better representation. And Hill is the better choice. You're muted, Andy.
We will see how those things shake out next Tuesday.
Yeah.
Again, the primary is Tuesday, August 6th. And you know, I will say the polling doesn't look too great for Hill, but crazy things can happen. I was so probably my I think the things that hinder them the most um is this is probably going to be a very low turnout primary. I said maybe there's a little bit more excitement on the Democratic side now that the person at the top of the ticket is not a walking skeleton. But I don't know if that translates necessarily into more people voting in the primary. One thing that could help Hill Harper is I don't know the degree to which the uncommitted campaign is engaging with these politics, but this is probably the state where having a principled stance on ceasefire could translate into some very significant electoral gains. I don't know how well Hill Harper's campaign has really tried to tap into that. I feel like there may be could have been a chance for them to really make that a central issue of the campaign and be able to contrast themselves with Slotkin in a way to Michigan's Arab American population uh, that would be really kind of strategic and advantageous for them. Um, let's make no mistake, Slotkin is just she has raised about 22 million, and I think that's almost about 20 times as much as Harper has raised. So he's definitely a dark horse candidate, definitely an underdog. Um, but again, there's a lot of X factors in this election. Could people's frustration over the war, the genocide in Gaza, propel him to winning on Tuesday? It's possible. How much is his ground? I think if they had a sufficient ground game in places like Detroit, Benton Harbor, some of the other urban centers, get some of those people who typically ignore primaries to actually vote. It could be a major upset. But again, I don't really know too much about their ground game in those areas and how strong it is. But I think it's possible. And hey, everybody, don't forget to vote. It's a lot of people forget to vote in these primaries, and especially here in District 4, where we're not voting for a choice on, Jessica Schwartz is basically shoo-in. That's probably going to depress turnout even a little bit further. But there's still a really important race going here on the state level, and even if Slotkin, gets a win for the deep state, as it were,
Hmm?
at least showing numbers, showing that there is support for those types of politics, is also important. That's something that you can leverage against elected representatives later on.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So we want to play catch up on the lifetime of news that we
Yeah, a few
hit on
things.
another
So,
Michigan story.
yeah, so we're in it's got 45 minutes left on the show, and we got to cover about 10 years of history or 2 weeks, really. Um, so yeah, as I'm joking, our new show was on hiatus for the last month. Needed to take some personal time, but it also happened during one of the most crazy news cycles I've seen maybe in like 8 years. Well, more than that, just based on what's happened. But let's just do chronologically and start with the first really crazy thing. Donald Trump almost got assassinated, and there's um, there's an element to
Wait,
this
did
new.
we? Did we talk about the debate? Did we talk about the debate before we went on hiatus?
Uh, we, I, I
Okay,
think so, but
okay, just
quick,
quick
quick
recap.
about debate. Yeah.
Okay, quick recap. Uh, so people were telling us that Biden had the lowest bar in the debate. He just needed to to seem competent. The bar was to the floor, and somehow he got on his hands and knees and got under it. He they both failed. Biden failed worse, and for a week and some change, every major pundit, news commentator, uh, in a media pundit was telling us Biden is our candidate. Anybody who wanted Biden to drop out was a bedwetter
Yeah, a bedwetter.
gaslighting
Yeah.
that you saw from not just mainstream media, but from the View. Yeah, from the View and from a bunch of other people that I actually respect. I love Roland Martin, but he was also one of those people. I love D.L. Hughley. He was also one of those people. While people like the Young Turks and Democracy Now and other shows were basically saying the thing that we all saw. Biden needs to drop out. He can't do it. Right after that, Trump got shot by a white Republican.
Wow.
Trump
Yeah.
got yeah. Trump was at a rally and he got shot. Either he got shot in the ear by a white dude that donated to a progressive pack and then spent the last 2 years of his life registering and voting for Republicans, who also Googled how he could find where he could find Joe Biden and where he could find Trump, because obviously he was planning on trying to do harm to a bunch of different politicians, but he started with Trump. The CIA, I mean the not the CIA, but the Secret Service had a massive security failure and miscommunication with the local police, because that man should not have gotten within 130 feet of Donald Trump with an assault style rifle. The fact that like that was crazy. Um, and while that happened, Biden got COVID, and that was after the RNC. The RNC happened. The RNC, which was one of the RNC tried to do the best rebranding I have ever seen.
Unity. Yep.
Inclusive, that they
Yep.
actually care about women and minorities. That Trump is not the troglodyte that we've seen over the last 8 years, right?
Mhm.
During during President Obama's administration, during his own administration, and since then, he's actually a really loving, caring guy. And then Trump picked JD Vance, who said that single people or people without children are denigrating our country. That it's miserable cat ladies that's ruining our country, and he's talking about people who can't have kids or just don't have kids. So Trump's children, Eric and his other child, convinced Trump to pick JD Vance, which just doubles down on the MAGA garbage. Trump gives one of the most incoherent and boring speeches I've ever seen. Amber Rose also spoke at the convention. Amber, we're gonna have to talk about you later because I don't have time.
So just a
Hulk Hogan.
quick note about JD Vance. So it's kind of what Lawrence was referring to is a lot of times people will they'll structure their presidential campaign so that their running mate has a potential to expand their base. So you even saw this in 2016 when Trump picked Mike Pence. That was kind of it was kind of a gesture to the evangelical base that like, hey, we're listening to you. I
That
got your
was a
back.
DEI pick. That was a
Yeah, yeah,
DEI pick because
yeah.
he shored up shored up not just the evangelical base but the donor base, because the donors like Mike Pence. They
Mhm.
didn't like Trump.
And
So he
JD
shored
Vance, that's almost like a
does
pick
not.
that you make when you're so confident that you're going to win the election, you just pick basically a toady whose whole role is to make your the MAGA movement have this intellectual veneer to it.
Yeah.
Um,
No, so JD Vance, and they were talking about it. JD Vance said that he would have done the thing that Trump wanted, which was not certify the election. The thing that Mike Pence said that the only time Mike Pence actually had some real integrity in his life, he was like, dog, we're not doing this. We're not going to do this. We're actually going to certify the election. Stop tripping. JD Vance said, no, I would actually have done the coup attempt that we were trying to do. So that's why they picked him. And again, this is the same man who said Trump is a modern day Hitler. He said, JD Vance said that Trump is like Hitler. Like, so so yeah, that happened. Trump was supposed to get a bump after the convention. He did not. JD Vance. Now more video of JD's statements has been coming to light, and they're not good. They're not good. They're not good. They're just not good. And conservative women and conservative members of his party, now the rumbling is, hey, uh, uh we might have to drop him from the ticket. So that's the rumblings now.
oh boy.
So Biden drops out. Finally, Biden drops out. Kamala Harris ends up becoming the new presumptive nominee. People like myself and other progressives were saying we should have an open convention to actually get the best candidate. But Kamala, with the amount of support and the same people who are telling you that Joe's really a dynamo behind the scenes. Joe could really do the thing, right? Joe has to stay in the race because he's the only one who can beat Trump. Quickly shifted on a dime and said, no, it has to be Harris. Harris can save us. And they all the same people that were gaslighting you and saying that it had to be Biden had to stay in the race, all were crying and and just giving the biggest and most wonderful BJs. It's basically saying it was amazing that Biden did the thing. And this is my point. This is my main point. It made me upset from a media analysis perspective. It made me upset watching news, watching the same people gaslighting us, telling us that we're bedwetters because we see with our own eyes that the Democrats are doing elder abuse to keep power. To then watch them change on a dime, to now praising Biden for one giving up power because he did the thing that Trump didn't do, was actually give up power when it was time to, and try to gaslight us in saying we didn't see what we saw. Now we all have to back Kamala. Now, to Kamala's credit, she did lock up a lot of delegates. A lot of delegates said that they are backing her and that they're supporting her. I wish that the progressives did not immediately back her, but that's a conversation for another time. But yeah, she's a presumptive nominee. She broke records, over 200 million donations, canvassing records. More millions of people are going out and door knocking and canvassing. More energy, lively energy has come into the party. Kamala's not my favorite pick. And especially if you've seen some of her interviews over the years and remember what she did during the 2020 election, how she got mollywopped on that stage so bad that she didn't even make it to the California primaries. She didn't even make it to the first primary, and that she had to drop out. Pete Buttigieg dropped out, and everybody dropped out to back Biden because Bernie was smacking everybody up in the first three states. And when she was leading, and she was number one, she was like the favorite. Tulsi Gabbard, who's not even a Democrat anymore, challenged her to defend her record in California, and she folded. She folded like an angry person doing towels. You understand me? Like it was bad. Like she was doing laundry.
Oh, and
Now,
by the way, just a quick aside, if folks are curious, I think we did a whole report on just her record as a prosecutor in California about 4 years ago or so. So
yeah,
if you're interested in look that whole history, Yeah, but
Yeah. So
going on like
recently, some people have done it too. I think I know TYT has done a breakdown of her record. I know Majority Report has done a breakdown of her record. I know Secular Talk has also done a breakdown of her record. Uh, I think the Humanist Report has as well. So I'm going off of all the lefty shows I like to watch. I'm sorry, but her record's mixed. It's her record is mixed. There are good things that she's done. There was also some garbage. I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you. But the case to be made that you have her biggest thing that she did when she was the AG of California was locking up sex offenders. That's what she did. That was some of her biggest cases. Donald Trump is a convicted sex offender. So you have it's the prosecutor versus the felon.
I mean,
I
it
need
does sound it's a little corny, but I can definitely see how it works. That's a good
yeah.
angle to come at it from. Is it
It's
just
if I need Kamala, like if I was a part of Kamala's team, I'd be like, hey, you remember how you was treating Brett Kavanaugh during his hearing? We need that from now until. We need that from now. We need that same energy. We don't need you laughing. The Republicans are basically saying she's a DEI candidate, that that her laugh is creepy, that she's not really with black people because she married a Jewish guy. Like it's the attacks have been wild. The dude on Fox News that said she was the original hot tool girl because she slept her way to the top. It has been the Republicans have been reminding the country why no one likes Republicans. They're weird. They're
yeah,
weird.
the wildest thing about that, like so there were news reports about like, the Republicans are working on a plan B on how to attack Kamala Harris if Joe Biden comes out. But it does seem like they're just kind of workshopping stuff in real time and mostly just coming up with a bunch of like racism and misogyny that even a lot of their own base just thinks is the weakest of sauces. I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it is bad. It is bad. It is very bad.
I say you can prepare a
Like so
900-page documents about how you're gonna like turn the country into an authoritarian ethno state, but you can't do like good op research on the vice president. Like,
there are so many things that you could attack this woman on legitly. Like actually attack her on, right?
it's fun.
They're
I
not
mean, the
doing
problem
they're
is
not doing
a
any of
lot
it.
a lot of the stuff you can attack Kamala Harris on is stuff they would have to basically attack her from the left on. Because again, a lot of it is like her worst stuff is her history as a prosecutor, and but they're the back of the blue people. They want so like yeah, they got to kind of twist themselves into pretzel knots if they were going to go that way. Now, I'm not saying they won't. Trump has a history of punching at people from kind of the left on certain issues like the military-industrial complex, et cetera. But it would definitely be a weird scene for Trump, who's trying to position him as like the friend of like police and wants a more authoritarian police state to turn around and be like this person was a bad prosecutor. So, but
Wait, here's the other part. Here's the other problem with that. This is the thing that I think Trump could flip. But here's another thing. Trump, when she was running for AG of California, sent her campaign contribution, sent her money. So so you're telling me you're gonna badmouth a person that you gave money to win in California? What are we doing here? If I
it's
was
a
Kamala,
funny yeah, it's
if
a
I
funny
was
thing because
Kamala,
like
that's how I would flip that.
I don't see either of them referencing it because it's like it's a liability for both of them because it's like Kamala doesn't want to have to explain why she received money from Donald Trump, and Donald Trump doesn't want to explain to his base why he
No,
gave money to
if
her. So,
if
but
I was if again, that's why I said like Donald Trump could flip that and be like, you're just like every other politician. I give money to politicians and they do my bidding. In other words, Kamala, bands will make you dance. Like he could flip that, but he's not gonna do that. If I was Kamala, the Epstein files in Florida was released. Donald Trump was noted in those files. Not only was he noted in those files, if you've read them, I have. Uh, Donald Trump was accused in Florida courts of, we're on the radio, so I have to be very kind on how I say this, of assaulting a 13-year-old, of in the way that you're thinking that I'm trying to say it, because I can't say it because we're on the radio. But it's telling that you know there's validity to it, because Trump was interviewed, I think, a week or 2 weeks ago about files that he would re-release if he was president. You know, the JFK files, 9/11 files. And then when they asked about the Epstein files, he was like, I don't know about that. I don't know about that. You know, there's stuff in there that might hurt some people's reputations.
Oh,
Not
some
sure.
people's,
And
huh?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
right, right. So
Yeah.
so if I was Kamala, again, if I was a part of her team. So basically, what everyone is waiting for now, and the big conversation that's going on now, is who's going to be the VP for Kamala. Now, I have my favorite two. I'm biased. I have my favorite two. I think Tim Waltz. Tim Waltz from what is it? Is I'm trying to find his state. He uh he's passed a number of progressive policies. Trying to see where he's Montana. Montana governor, Tim Waltz. That dude has passed a myriad of progressive policies. He's codified abortion rights, background checks on private gun transitions, red flag laws, transgender right protection. He's banned conversion therapy, paid family and medical leave, and paid sick leave, legalized recreational marijuana, driver's licenses for undocumented residents, restored voting rights for former felons, expanded education funding, and expanded food programs for kids who do not get who only gets their meals as from school. So he's expanded lunch programs for needy families, and $1 billion of investment in affordable housing. You want to talk about progressive policies that we talk about all the time that the average American wants? He's past them. Like that, he's my favorite. And when it comes to who I would want as the VP for Harris, my other favorite is Big Gretch. Big Gretch has also passed a number of policies. I did not vote for Big Gretch. I voted for Abdullah C because Abdullah C actually wants universal health care. That's how you're gonna get me every time. I'm sorry. But she did expand Medicaid in our state. She's also has done put a lot of money into infrastructure in Michigan. She's also helped fight she also helped implement red flag laws and other gun control legislation in Michigan. She's done some pretty decent legislation. Now, has she done a lot of great legislation? No. But has she done some good legislation in Michigan? Absolutely. So those are my two favorites. Um, the one that I'm hoping and praying that they do not pick is the governor, I think, or senator from Arizona, the conservative, super conservative boy. Nah, I don't like that. I don't like that. I don't like that. I don't like Shapiro. Shapiro can go take
We
several seats.
generally on this show, people's
Yeah,
last with the surname Shapiro, we're not big fans of, but
but yeah, man,
uh,
like Minnesota, the Minnesota legislator, that the governor of Minnesota and his legislation and their governing body has passed a number of policies that make democratic socialists like me smile. And I'm like, yes, that's who she needs as her VP. Like it's those two. Gretchen, because Gretchen can get us Michigan, and we need to have Michigan to win. Uh, Tim Waltz, because he's an actual progressive in policy who will get things done, who will push Kamala more to the left.
So I think what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna start from this one and kind of run it backwards because I've got some
Yeah,
extra commentary on basically everything we just talked about.
yeah.
So first thing, so as far as beat picks, my guess, I don't think Gretchen Whitmer is going to take it. I think um, just the quarterback, post game quarterbacking or pre game quarterbacking, whatever. I think their political instincts are probably not to hitch their wagon in this particular race because it's still a lot of things are still in flux, and I think she wants to make her own run at some point. And if Trump gets elected in November, that's not going to look good if you were associated with that ticket, et cetera. I again, I also, got the Gretchen's got her own bad record on certain things. Talk about kind of the failure to really clamp down on Line 5, trying to shut down Benton Harbor School District. Something too I think that should be brought up is against the wishes of many of the constituents in her state. She's been pretty quiet on the whole Gaza situation, which I think is not only electoral, but it's also a moral liability. Um, and I want to kind of transition from this, talk a little bit about kind of the coronation of Kamala Harris and talk about um, something that I think is worth diving into a little bit, which is kind of the state of quote unquote democracy in the Democratic Party. So who would be my VP pick? Um, if they really wanted to clean up the floor, if you wanted to just lock it up and throw away the key, and you would the running mate, you would pick somebody like Bernie Sanders, most popular politician in the country, etc. We need to really describe it. You get all of the progressive young excitement. They're never in a million years going to do that. And I think it's worth talking about how we came to where we're at with the candidate Kamala Harris. And something that a comrade of mine pointed out, and I think rings very true, is like there has not been a Democratic primary, especially a lot of younger people listening to this. There's not been one in your lifetime. You go back, probably the last one we can think of is 2008. And even then, some of what we've learned since then, in the context of what's happened to Joe Biden, and so rings very true even back to that election, which is that the donor class really picks the candidate. And, beyond that, it's almost sort of a pretense. So let's go back to 2016. That was 8 years ago. Some of the younger folks may not remember this stuff. We were sure talking a lot about it at the time. Hillary Clinton was basically coronated as the candidate. It became revealed via WikiLeaks and other press that the Democratic Party had basically slanted the board, however you want to call it, in Hillary Clinton's favor. Not to mention the above the board stuff they were doing with super delegates that was giving Hillary Clinton a huge artificial lead over Bernie Sanders ahead of time. Fast forward to 2020, Bernie Sanders running right out of the gate. Won the first several primaries in the history of presidential primaries. That has been the candidate that goes on to get the nomination. Right before Super Tuesday, Obama makes a couple of phone calls, consolidates support for Biden, who at the time was trailing behind even some of the younger centrist candidates. The donor class just, shot everything that it had to take down the Bernie Sanders campaign, and then COVID happened. Now,
Wait. And now it's funny that now some of the people that Peter Thiel and some of those people now are basically coming out and bragging about it now. That
that's true. Yeah.
this is basically what happened. But sorry, continue.
But no, yeah, that's exactly right. Now we're at this place where, you know, Biden himself in 2020 said, I'm going to be a one-term candidate. People in the Democratic base have been asking him to be a one-term candidate for years. Massive polling, even before we were having the post-debate discussions, we're saying he needs to be replaced with a younger, more viable candidate. The Democratic Party chose not to have primaries this year. They waited and waited and waited. And whether this is a conscious choice of Joe Biden or not, it doesn't really matter in the
They
end.
canceled Florida and
Yeah,
South Carolina's
yeah,
primaries. They
yes,
literally canceled those primaries.
yeah. They marginalized anybody who sought the nomination, Mary Wilson, etc. And they didn't have an actual primary. So when it came down to the wire and they the donor class decided again, um, we need to be very clear who decided Biden should step down. It wasn't us. It was the opinion of most of the voting public that he should step down, but it was one of those situations where the opinions of the donor class and the opinions of the mass of the electorate synced up in such a way that they're like, okay, Biden will step down. But immediately, Kamala Harris, who never won a federal primary, gets elevated into this position. There's not going to be a contested convention. And some people are upset about that. But to somebody who's been watching how the Democratic Party has operated over the last, 8, 12 years, this shouldn't be too surprising because the Democratic Party has not really been democratic in their primaries for that long. And by Biden stepping down at the 11th hour, it precludes the possibility of support being able to be rounded up for a more progressive candidate. I mean, even if you were to have a contested convention at this point, it would be the handful of corporate handpicked candidates they think will do well in election. The people are not given an actual choice. And for those of us who lived through all of these elections, all these events, I get it. There's a lot of excitement out there that people don't have to vote for the crypt keeper to stop the fascist McDonald's fan. But don't make no mistake. This is basically being shoved at us, shoved down our throats in much the same way that those previous progressive campaigns were tamped down. And I thought, just interesting as a side note, noticed like again, a lot of the quote unquote squad progressives were Biden dead enders, which was very unusual because most grassroots progressives were on the same page with the donors at this time, like Biden should step down. I think part
I
of
have a
that,
theory. I have a theory on that.
yeah.
If you wouldn't mind
Oh,
hearing
go
it.
ahead. Yeah, yeah. It might sync up
Okay,
with mine, but
so so okay, so I have two theories. One theory is everybody saw the debate. Everybody saw how bad that debate was, right? If I wish that the progressives didn't say anything, but I wish behind the scenes they would have they I wish that the progressives were a much more Machiavellian in how they move, but they're not, right? In this aspect that they came out and basically they were basically saying Biden still needs to stay in, Bernie and others, and AOC and others. When they didn't want to be the first ones to be like Biden has to drop out, and then being blamed in the media because you know how the media loves to blame everything on progressives. They would have been the first people to be blamed on why Biden is stepping down, why his poll numbers are bad, because everybody was still convinced that Biden was going to stay in. Also, behind the scenes, what we find out is that Biden's wife and son were the ones that were basically weekend and Bernie's Biden during these conversations with world leaders and with their cabinet. They were the ones telling what Biden what to say because he's not there. He admits between 10 p.m. and 10 a.m. and 8 p.m. That's when he's president. But that's when he can be president because he has to go to bed because he's 80 years old. He's tired, right? And also multiple stories from the Washington Post and others of Alzheimer doctors going to the White House like 12 or 14 times within the last 2 years, right? So they knew, right, that he couldn't handle. But the progressives were like, we don't want to be blamed for this man stepping down. So we're gonna cheerlead, but we all know that he has to step down. And that's kind of that's my main theory. My second theory is some of our favorite progressives, because either they're friends with Biden or because of their proximity to power, they also were just like, look, we've already accepted the notion that Trump's going to win, so we're planning for 2028. And that was their game theory, that we've accepted that we're going to lose, so we're going to plan for 2028. Forgetting the fact that, look, we understood that Biden was going to drop out, but if Kamala wins, Kamala's definitely going to win that first. When she may win this election, it's still close. But if she wins this first election, y'all are y'all really going to primary her in 2028? No, y'all gonna have to wait till 32. And that's what they were, and that's where they're now being like, you know what? I can wait till 32. It's not gonna be that big of a problem, right? That's my theory.
Yeah, I think part of it too is, a lot of there's kind of a divergence between you have people like AOC and to a certain extent Bernie Sanders, who I think because they have had more open channels with the Biden administration than previous ones, there was a concern. It's like, are we going to have the same relationship with a President Kamala Harris? And there, to be fair, there have been at least attempts to push through more progressive legislation in these 4 years. There has been a at least a small break from the neoliberal status quo.
I
But
mean, he canceled student loan debt. He didn't cancel a lot of it. It didn't affect a lot of people, but it did affect about 10%. It affected 10%. 10% of those who have student loan debt. That's still a lot of students.
yeah, and
Like,
I could go deeper into like I have my own critiques on that view of how to exercise power. And I think like again, it's a lot of people were hoping like quote unquote, the squad would be more about fighting the establishment rather than a lot of what they've been doing is more of this kumbaya thing. We all have to unite to fight the right. But like again, it's um, you look at a difference in historical periods. There was this recognition that to fight fascism, we need to embrace these progressive policies, and like a lot of more progressive people force that in the conversation. Whereas in this historical period, it seems the reverse. Um, and it's something we should keep in mind as we are entering this election, where make no mistake about it, the American voter is faced again in a competition between uh, not who was elected, but who was selected. And even a lot of the stories I see coming out from the New York Times talking about how like the donors now are switching from Trump to Kamala. It's again, it makes it seem like the actual election is more like window dressing um, than anything else. And in a very real sense, it is. And I do encourage people to understand that regardless of who wins in November, they're still going to be, they're still going to pledge allegiance to the United States of capitalism, and we're going to have to fight them on those terms. And I think that segues into something else I wanted to hit on, which was um, when Sean O'Brien made that speech at the RNC, which, again, there's a lot of pushback on that. There's a lot of people calling him a scab. And
hey, we're
there's
gonna
even a
have me and you probably gonna have differencing opinions on that.
well, here's the problem. A lot of the content of his speech was very fiery, and I thought it was, if it had just been, I am going to take you to task in your own house, which is what a lot of those parts of the speech sounded like. That would have been pretty nice. And like at first, that's actually more kind of what I took from it. But there was a follow-up story that really concerned me where he was basically trying to align the Teamsters with this this identity reductionism, trying to talk about how unions should not stand up for their LGBTQ plus members. And that was honestly to me, that was the scariest thing I saw in the wake of the RNC. And let me explain
Hmm.
why. Um, if Trump wins in November, or even if he doesn't, um, the you know, and so I've been telling people when they despair about things like Project 2025 is I think the solution to that is not Kamala Harris or the Democratic Party. It's let's be cheeky about it. Let's call it Project 2028. There, Sean Fain from the UAW has been talking about organizing a general strike in 2028, and the best way to prevent politicians and think tanks from trying to do stuff like 2025 is make the rich afraid again. The reason we got the New Deal back in the 30s, it was not because, all of these ruling class people were benevolent and felt bad. It was because they were afraid of a socialist revolution. They were afraid of their profits disappearing into the air because of mass general strikes and the like. Now, the scary thing about what Sean O'Brien did is okay, yeah, go to the Republican National Committee, call them out in their house. I mean, don't call Trump a tough SOB because, man, he's a capitalist. He is a billionaire. He is against unions. But first and foremost, do not engage in this identity reductionism that, again, history has taught us time and time and time again. When labor is allowed to get split, um, Gerald Horn, great historian, has talked about this class collaboration. When elements of the working class who adhere to these reactionary views collaborate with the ruling class, it always leads to a bad outcome. It always leads to us falling short of the solidarity we need to get the gains that we need to get. And I really feel like this is Sean O'Brien almost like kind of testing the waters with this failed and duplicitous strategy again, where we're going to collaborate with the ruling class through these cultural issues. And what happens in the end is the ruling class buries you time and time and time again and uses these fracture lines in our cultures to split the solidarity we are going to need for the kind of actions that can prevent stuff like Project 2025, i.e., a general strike. Now, there's some contention even amongst the Teamsters about this. The vice president of the Teamsters came out really strong against it and then ended up deleting it. But, you know, whether we get more of the kind of soft neoliberalism of Harris or the turbocharged neoconservatism of another Trump administration, we are going to need labor solidarity to fight back against that. And if we've got people like Sean O'Brien out there talking about how we shouldn't stand up for queer folks, we are in capital T trouble. Capital T trouble.
Okay. There's multiple things that you said that I agree with. Yeah, worker solidarity, I agree with. We don't need to have leaders of massive organizations that our comrades are part of, basically throwing them under the bus for financial or political gain. I agree with all of that. The thing that I do push back against, and also one of the other things about Sean O'Brien's speech at the RNC that I had issue with was the conflation of Republicans being for unions and the working class. They are not. They are not in any way, shape, or form. That was my biggest issue with the speech because he was giving credit to fake populists, like the vice president, like
Yeah.
Matt Gates, who
Basically
paid a seven.
coverage to people who have spent their whole career trying to dismantle unions. I mean,
Yeah,
it's in these people's
yeah.
strategic handbooks. Like, yeah,
So 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 yes. So there are some of that I do agree with. This is where I push back because also, Matt Gates is a disgusting human being that should be in jail because he paid a 17-year-old for sexual favors. But again, that's a different conversation. Um, the thing that I push back against is that speech that you heard from that he gave at the RNC, in my opinion, was one of the best speeches that came out of a convention. First of all, he didn't endorse the president. What convention speech do you remember where someone is the head speaker of one of the nights and they do not endorse the person whose convention it is? That was crazy. But the second thing was the content of his speech, talking about um, how right to work laws and other union busting tactics hurts the working class. Talking about how unions protect and help uh your average American. That type of speech that he gave, I would expect at a Netroots Nation type of speech. I would expect to hear that type of speech at a Democratic convention. The fact that it was given to the Republican voters on their biggest, like on day one, on night one, where most of those people probably did not, one, they didn't know if Trump was going to be there, then Trump did show up, but two, they heard a progressive populist speech from a working class perspective that they've never heard because all of the other speakers there, and it showed the Tim Scotts, the Marco Rubios, and all the others that spoke. They gave anti-worker, anti-union speech, and he was the only one that was like, "No, we at the Teamsters, or we who are in unions, we're fighting for you, your average worker, and on your behalf." That was a fantastic message to get to people who've never heard it and never had it presented to them. So, on the one hand, I agree with you that if he's throwing people who are marginalized, who are part of the unions, under a bus so that they could get better, so they can get more money, so people like him can make more money, that's garbage. Because your goal is supposed to be helping the average worker people, average person. And also conflating those who have been trying to bust unions to be on the side of unions is garbage. On the other hand, getting the message to those who've never heard it that we as working class people need to stick together so that we don't live under corporate rule, because that was what his entire speech was about. That's fantastic. And to do that in the Lions Den, to do that in the Republican spaces, like, I take that win.
I will say, yeah, in a lot of parts of that speech, it did really feel like, basically, like you said, going into the Lions Den and uh, basically giving them like a warning shot in their own house. I'm just saying that it's like what happened after that,
Yeah.
and kind of the lack of context about like who the Republicans are as a party and their how they played into dismantling of unions. I think that really was kind of fumbling the bag. And I don't know what Sean
Yeah.
O'Brien necessarily is
Yeah.
trying to do. If he's trying to cozy up to Republicans in some way. Again, failed strategy, bad politics, and just bad morally also to throw your queer workers under the bus. We've only got like a minute and a half left. And I did want to hit on one last thing real quick. So I think one of the most stunning things about going back to the assassination attempt is this show's called Media Cyphers, and nobody's talking about it anymore. That story had the shelf life of about a week, and a lot of people thought it would affect his poll numbers, and it didn't. And that actually was one of my predictions. I felt like this really isn't going to do much but give more red meat to his base. They love to see Trump as this martyr who was almost shot, but like for most people already made up their minds, and if they're undecided, they're not going to get swayed because somebody took a really badass photo of Trump right after he just got uh, attempted assassination. I also thought it was.
I could tell you why it did not have the shelf life that it had. I
Why
mean,
do you
what's
say?
the
But
I mean, fan theory, just game theory. Um, the identity of the shooter.
that too, yeah.
What was the language? What was the one thing that at the RNC that they talked about more than anything else? Migrant crime, the crime in the inner city. Oh my God, we have all this crime around us, right? We need to have uh we need to make sure that we keep our Second Amendment rights intact. JD Vance told his story about Mima or his grandma or whatever having 19 guns at the crib, right?
Yeah, no, for real.
All the smoke. They had all the smoke in the world for we need to protect our guns. We have all this crime, migrant crime, inner city crime, all this stuff. Who was the shooter? It was a white kid that was a Republican.
Mm-hmm.
If that was a black shooter, like okay, one of the stories that a lot of Republicans was telling was the murder of a girl who got killed by a undocumented person, right? They kept so much so that the girl's family is like, can y'all stop using my family as a tool because misrepresenting the story and you're getting the story wrong. They will harp on that when it fits their narrative. The person that shot, first of all, they don't want to talk about red flag laws because the kid would have been flagged because he was already going through mental issues. They don't want to talk about red flag laws. They don't want to talk about background checks because of the kid. Because if they did, this person wouldn't have been able to get a gun. They don't want to talk about any of the things that would have stopped this person from opening fire on the former president. And because they don't want to speak on any of that, Trump getting part of his ear blown off is just,
It's another
it's
day in
just Tuesday.
America. Yep.
Right, it's another day in America. It is Tuesday.
hmm Yep. No, pretty
They
much. Yep.
Go
And
ahead.
I did mention this on the show right after it happened, but I did just want to emphasize again all of the discourse in the media about political violence. And, you know, um, I just kind of want to leave this point is like, so it's political violence to attempt to assassinate the president. So killing tens of thousands of Gazans, that's not political violence. Or people going without necessary health care every year. That's not political violence. Or people getting chopped up at the border with after going through like a sadistic saw-like trap. That's not political violence. Or even when you withhold water from them or other necessary or ripping families apart. That's not political. It's, my point of this is America does political violence all the time. And the way you saw everybody clutching their pearls at the same time over what happened to Trump, what it really demonstrates is the ruling class does not consider violence to be political or violence to be unacceptable unless it's happening to them, unless it's happening to
Oh,
somebody in the ruling class. Violence happening
I
to
have a
Gazans or American citizens because of either gun control or poverty or homelessness or name an issue. That isn't violence because that's happening to the working class.
I also I'm glad you brought that up. I did my quick hit before we have to go. Shout out to Representative Rashida Tlaib and all the people who
Absolutely.
protested Bibi Netanyahu when he came to Congress. And shame on all of those trained SEALs that were clapping for him when he was shaming Americans, tax-paying Americans who give their money, whose money is used to give to Israel to bomb innocent brown and black children. Rashida Tlaib, for those who do not know, who did not see it, when Bibi came to address Congress, she didn't protest the speech. She sat there with a sign that said war criminal, and it said war criminal, and I think genocide, uh genocider or something on the other side. I forgot what the other thing said on the back. But
Guilty of
she let
genocide, I think it was.
yeah, guilty of genocide. She let it be known that this man should not be there. And also, you had Jewish Voice for Peace. You had Israeli and Jewish brothers and sisters that were prisoners that end up getting arrested by Capitol Police because they were protesting Bibi Netanyahu. And it was disgusting to me to see how the media portray the protesters as being violent, or because some of them did some graffiti on the Liberty Bell or whatever, that some of them burned the American flag, and that was violent. But this man and that man that addressed Congress and his government bombing schools where refugees are in, bombing United Nations buildings where refugees are in, bombing hospitals, killing children, shooting and executing doctors and nurses. World Food Organizations, they do not talk about how that violence has ended folks' lives and existences, but people protesting him in ways that they don't like is violent. When we talk about as media ciphers, well, the reason why was named the show, we talked about media's analysis. Everyone that you saw that depicted the protesters as being violent and unruly, like they were being like they are the ones that were in the wrong, instead of calling out Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli government for what they've been doing. That's the problem in the media, and that's the problem in our country. They will have you, as Malcolm X said, cheering on the wolves and the foxes and hating the sheep that's being killed. I'm paraphrasing, but yes.
That's 1,000%, 1,000%. That's a perfect note to leave on. I was
Yeah.
gonna get more time. Maybe we can talk about that further next week. But I
Oh
think
yeah,
we're
no, we
gonna,
definitely should.
yeah. Well, we're gonna wrap things up now, though. Lawrence, thanks again for coming on to the show. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in after our little vacation. We will be back next week with more coverage. And in a couple weeks, I'm planning to be there at the DNC in just a couple weeks there. So we will have some on the ground coverage for you on that. Until next time, everybody, just a quick reminder, you can find us on Facebook, YouTube, and Media Cyphers Kalamazoo podcast. Until next time, keep on fighting for that revolution solution.